Hello, hello. My name is Solmaz, and you're listening to the Tabling Thoughts podcast. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about my experiences as a relationship coach and a psychotherapist. The little points that I notice in my clients' life that each of them affect the quality of their lives and their relationships enormously. And for some reason, they don't pay that much of attention to those points. And of course, confidentiality is always there. Before we start, if you want to know a little bit about me, as I mentioned, I'm a relationship coach with the fancy name of effective relationship strategist. I also practice as a psychotherapist in Ontario, Canada. I live in Canada. I'm married and I have a son. I also have another podcast called Lam Ta Kalam, which is in Farsi for my Farsi speaking audience. Lam Ta Kalam is a very well received podcast. As of today, it has more than 3.5 million downloads on just Castbox. The purpose of Lam Ta Kalam, same as Tabling Thoughts, has always been to talk about the issues, not necessarily give direct or custom-made solutions. And of course, the same applies here. So if you know anyone who speaks in Farsi and is looking for that kind of content, Lam Ta Kalam is the place to go. You may find the link to my Instagram page and all other information, including Lam Ta Kalam's links, in the description. Today, you are listening to the third episode of Tabling Thoughts, which is being published in February 2024, and I'm going to talk about toxic guilt. In psychology, excessive and unjustified guilt that overextends typical emotions of regret is referred to as toxic guilt. Toxic guilt can have a damaging effect on mental health, resulting in unjustified feelings of shame, low self-esteem, low self-worth, and self-blame. Therapeutic procedures are frequently used to address toxic guilt in order to investigate its causes and create more effective coping strategies. Working with my clients, both in coaching area and clinical clients, I have come across too many individuals whom being suffered from carrying toxic guilt in different areas of their lives. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the several circumstances that toxic guilt can cause, can develop, and some strategies that we can address the toxic guilt in our day-to-day lives. So let's start with several circumstances that toxic guilt can develop. The first one that I have seen is one of the most important one is called unrealistic expectations. Having overly high expectations for one can cause shame when those expectations are not reached. Unrealistic expectations involve setting standards or goals that are way beyond what is reasonably achievable or sustainable. When individuals carry overly high expectations for themselves, it creates a breeding ground for shame when they inevitably fall short of meeting these unrealistic standards. Meaning that when I set some kind of goals for myself that they're way beyond my abilities or resources or knowledge, not being able to reach those kind of high expectations causes an extreme amount of shame for myself. Either other people agree with it or not. I'm the first enemy of myself. People with unrealistic expectations often create rigid framework for success, where anything less than perfection is deemed as a failure. This rigid mindset can lead to a constant sense of inadequacy and shame as individuals internalize the belief that not meeting those standards reflects negatively on their abilities or characters. Shame in this context arises from the discrepancy between what one expects for themselves and the reality of what they can realistically achieve. This kind of shame is fueled by self-critical thoughts and the perception that falling short of those unrealistic expectations is a personal shortcoming. Breaking free from the cycle of shame associated with unrealistic expectations involves cultivating self-awareness and a more realistic perspective on personal goals, meaning that when you set the goal for yourself, the first step is to figure it out how much of it is realistic, how much of it is what you think you should achieve in short period of time. It's essential to reassess, adjust these expectations to align with what is achievable and maintainable. Embracing a growth mindset where challenges are viewed as opportunities for learning rather than as indicators of failure can also be transformative in mitigating the shame linked to unrealistic expectations. Furthermore, fostering self-compassion and understanding that everyone has limitations and moments of imperfection. It's very crucial. By allowing room for mistakes and setbacks, we can build a healthier relationship with ourselves and be more aware of the emotional toll of unattainable expectations. So we talked about the unrealistic expectations as the first circumstance of toxic guilt. What's the second one? Is perfectionism. People who are perfectionists may feel a great deal of guilt if they think there is a mistake. That's the biggest enemy of us. Perfectionism is a personality trait characterized by setting extremely high standards for oneself and striving for flawlessness in all endeavors. Individuals who call themselves perfectionists often experience a profound sense of guilt in the fact of making mistakes or if they have shortcomings. Perfectionists have a rooted fear of making mistakes. If you meet people who are always looking for creating something perfect, you will observe this rooted fear of making mistakes, which lead to a constant state of self-criticism. Even minor errors, mistakes, or imperfection can trigger an overwhelming sense of guilt, since perfectionists tend to tie their self-worth closely to the achievements that they think they're achievements actually, and the pursuit of perfection. The guilt associated with perfectionism is not just about the mistake itself. It often stems from the irrational belief that being less than perfect reflects negatively on one's character or value as a person. Again, breaking free from shackles of perfectionism involves challenging this kind of unrealistic standards and developing a healthier perspective on mistakes. Embracing the idea that making errors is a natural part of the learning and growth process can help to ease the excessive guilt associated with perfectionism. The third one is codependency. Any kind of perceived failure or disappointment may set as poisonous shame in relationships where one person overly depends on the other's validation. You may observe this kind of codependencies in the relationship between parents and kids, partners, students and teachers, or even kids and parents after kids growing up. The person who is dependent on the other individual may always carry a humongous amount of shame if they don't get the validation from the other person. The fourth one is the past trauma or abuse. Even though it wasn't your fault that you were exposed to past traumas or abuses, yet those who have suffered from this kind of traumas may internalize the guilt, and this guilt is a toxic guilt because the root hasn't been caused by you. We talked about the different factors that may cause this kind of toxic guilt. Now let's talk about the many strategies that toxic guilt can be addressed through. The first step could be self-awareness. If I identify and accept the toxic guilt, I will be able to recognize that it's out of proportion to the circumstances and could result from illogical thinking. Meaning, in many circumstances, toxic guilt doesn't come from the incident that has happened. Rather, it comes from our thoughts and the rumination and the circulation of negative thoughts. So, having said that, the second step could be challenging the negative thoughts. Consider whether your guilt, including ideas, are genuinely justified. Do they come from reasonable expectations? I always talk about the miracle of pen and paper. Jot down 3 negative thoughts and ideas that constantly are circulating in your mind. Now, in front of each of those ideas and thoughts, write 3 false assumptions that are causing this kind of toxic guilt. And you will see most of the thoughts that create that kind of negative, toxic feelings in us, they're based on false assumptions. If you have challenges in the first 2 steps, you may need to seek professional help. You need help to assess the cause of toxic guilt and create more constructive coping mechanisms and strategies. Think about treatments such as cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. Doing so, the fourth strategy could be self-compassion. Show kindness to yourself as a way of practicing self-compassion. Have empathy toward yourself. Recognize that everyone makes errors. Instead of using this as a justification for a constant self-blame, use it as a chance for improvement. Meaning that each time you feel you did something that is not perfect, that is a mistake, that you may need validation of others for it, first think that this is an area of improvement. And of course, the fifth step is set realistic standards, as we talked earlier. Lower your standards to something more reasonable. Having unrealistic expectations, as we talked, might lead to excruciating guilt. And then work on forgiveness. Forgive yourself for any perceived shortfalls or mistakes. Mistakes are prerequisites of any kind of improvement or success. Remind yourself you are a human being and you may make any kind of mistakes. Then focus on positive reinforcements. Pay attention to the good things you have done and who you are as of today. Remember, if you're listening to my voice, it means that you have come way out of your comfort zone and you're facing part of your personality that you may not be happy with. So reward yourself for your efforts and accomplishment instead of focusing only on your shortcomings. Recall that getting over toxic guilt is frequently a slow process and that getting help from loved ones, friends, or mental health specialists can be very helpful along the way. Okay, let's wrap it up here. And I'm going to ask you again to write down whatever comes to you, reflect on it, and think about it. When was the last time you felt huge amount of guilt that toxically affected your mental health? Write it down, figure it out that what was the main reason of it. Was it perfectionism? Was it unrealistic expectations, past traumas, whatever? And then see what kind of negative thoughts are hooked to them and how many false assumptions are hooked to it. And then use the steps of forgiveness, self-awareness, on and on and on to deal with this big enemy of your well-being. I hope this episode has been helpful for you. I hope you use this episode in difficult times when this monster of toxic guilt comes to you. And please be kind to yourself.